First time poster, hope this fits here. I've got to preface this a bit with my father's background. I feel like it explains things pretty well. Kinda. My dad's side of the family are pretty damn country. My grandfather was a retired gunsmith and my grandma grows her own veggies. My dad played football all through high school, and when he wasn't doing that he was hunting and fishing. I grew up used to the fact that my dad did things the country way. He went to feed stores and got vaccinations for all of our dogs and administered them himself. When they got too old to eat, he put them down and dug the graves himself. When his arch-fucking nemesis shot up our house, he took justice into his own hands. Or attempted to. My dad's first company was a pretty successful fire safety company in the area, until his best friend / co-owner ran off with all the clients. This left my family with nothing. We were very poor and had to relocate 300 miles away to live with his parents. This should have been the last we'd heard of his old best friend, but evil never dies. Or whatever. Flash forward 11 years. We'd been living in a small town south of Dallas for about 6 years now, and things were okay. We were still poor, just not as poor. But we were living in a house again and the business was doing well, so things were good. Until Jimmy Ray Jr. showed up. Jimmy was the eldest son of the dirtbag who fucked over my dad, and he came to us, asking for a job so he could get away from his shitty father. He had a wife and baby on the way and he just had to get out from under the thumb of his father. My dad has a thing for taking in strays, so soon Jimmy was working for my dad. Now Jimmy was a real fucking creep. He used to hit on me constantly, going so far as to pull my in his lap as often as he could, and delighted in asking me if certain things turned me on. I hated him and told my parents this constantly. They wouldn't believe that Jimmy was a bad guy. But then things started getting really weird. We lived just outside city limits at the time, and there was always a lot of space between you and your neighbors. This meant that lots of activity could go on and they probably wouldn't notice. This also meant that the truck parked down the street all day every day was actually pretty visible to us. At first, we thought the old couple down at the bend had purchased a new truck and maybe there just wasn't enough space in their driveway. Until my mom drove by on her way back from groceries and saw a man in the truck with binoculars in his lap. This continued on for weeks, until one day the truck just wasn't there anymore. Then other stuff started. It was a Monday night and everyone was knocked out. Dad had work, Mom had work, and my 2 brothers and I had school the next day. Imagine the terror when the back door sounds like someone is going at it with a battering ram. Riley, the oldest of my 2 brothers, was first to jump up. I was next, despite having the room furthest away from the living room. The door was pushed in, being held by the chain. Everyone else came filing in after us, confused and tired. Riley started to shout that someone had kicked in the door, but my parents wouldn't hear it and said the weather must have done it. After all, it was a stormy night. Riley and I disagreed. It wasn't that stormy, and the nails that held the chain to the wall had been ripped nearly all the way out. The doorknob was messed up. It wasn't the weather. A couple more weeks pass and we're dealing with the same shit. Fire extinguishers going missing. Doors getting hammered on. Our dog, losing her fucking shit every night. The final straw for my dad. My stoner-ass brother took a couple of his friends out to my van in the middle of the night to smoke. Our driveway was fairly long and my van was parked at the very end. It needed to be fixed up, so better to have it out of the way. There was still driveway to spare as it was long and very wide. Riley says they heard the truck, but just assumed it had stopped at the stop sign. But then, there was gunfire. We're talking sprays of bullets. And instead of ducking for cover, the dumbass busts out of the van with his friends just in time for the shooter to jump back into his truck and the driver to peel out. Well, my dad sure as hell believes us now. Instead of calling the cops, he called Jimmy. Asked him if he knew anyone with the truck that matched the description my brother provided. And when he said yes, it all clicked into place. You see, Jimmy's dad was real pissed his son went to work for the competition. He took it as a personal attack that my dad had accepted Jimmy with open arms. And he was willing to do what it took to get Jimmy to quit, or convince my dad to fire him. Instead, my dad hatched a plan. He and Jimmy spent days shoving long nails into a thick rope. They covered the windows. They stocked the barn and the house with provisions. They sent the rest of us away for Thanksgiving, and waited. The plan was simple. They assumed that since we were being watched, Jimmy's dad would think we had all gone off for the holidays. He'd probably try to break in while we were away. And then, when he did, he would find my dad waiting for him, gun in hand. And if he managed to get away, that's when Jimmy, who had been forced to wait in the barn, would pull the nail-riddled rope across the street and bust their tires. But no one ever showed. You see, Jimmy had decided to go back to his dad. Told him so. Even went so far as to make copies of all of our invoices. And since he had given some to his old man, the guy decided to leave us alone. But Jimmy didn't leave right away. No, he had plans. Plans that entailed trapping a 17-year-old girl in her room. Plans that involved betraying his wife. Plans that involved betraying the man who had taken him in. Now, he never got far with me. But he did manage to steal half of our clients and send us back into a financial tailspin. Like father, like son. So Jim, let's not meet. You wouldn't like it very much. My oldest brother has a drug addiction and it has led to more than a few times meeting people I'd rather not ever know. Some of them are pretty harmless but weird, some of them are nice one day and not the next, and some of them are plain balls to the wall certifiable. Just some background, I'm the eldest, my brother Age is the second eldest, but eldest brother, and Nat is the third eldest. There's 4 brothers and another sister, but only Age, Nat, and I were the ones involved this time. At the time this incident occurred, we were living in a house on the highway of the town I was born in. I was about 30, living with my mother, her boyfriend, and Nat. I was medically unable to work at the time, and Nat has a mental disability that makes it impossible for him to work, so he and I were in charge of the house. Easter had just passed and Age rang up begging to be allowed to come home for a while since he'd just broken up with his newest ex. Mom, being a soft touch when it comes to us kids, was all for letting him crash in the lounge, but only with the promise that there'd be no drugs or alcohol in the house. He gave his word, Nat, and I face-palmed. Age has done this a few times, and Age set up house in the lounge for the next week. Or so it was supposed to be, anyway. A month later and several drug addicts becoming regulars at our door, and Mum finally got annoyed enough to tell Age to look for a flat/caravan/anything. He wasn't allowed to stay any longer. Nat and I, who had been dealing with knocks on the door every day, and a police raid of all things, yeah, fun, sighed in relief. Age found a nice flat in the next town over. We resumed our happy, quiet, knock-free lives and all was well, for a week. Then the phone calls started. They began as a quick succession of calls around dinner time, 2 or 3 at a time, with an immediate hang-up as soon as we asked who was there. Meh, nothing too troublesome. Of course, then it escalated. They began happening at 11 p.m., which quickly got on Mum's goat. She has no time for annoyances past 10 p.m., and even family knows not to call the house phone that late or suffer her wrath. So it was no surprise when after about the 5th night of phone calls we heard Mum shouting over the phone to the person on the line that if they called again she'd call the cops. The phone call stopped, and we shrugged it off as someone being stupid. A few days later I was the only one at home when I heard a car revving nearby. Now, the house we lived in had no fence around the front yard, just a concrete setting where a hedge would have been planted at some point. Mum had put some cactuses there, flanking the path that led into the front yard proper. Image at bottom. To the side of the house was a nature strip where Mum sometimes parked her pride and joy, beastie, a car. HSV something or rather. She'd be horrified to know I don't know the specs since it's been her obsession for years now. Sports kit, limited edition apparently. IDK. Across the road in that direction was a car dealership who had show cars. To the right of us was house that was locked up and currently had no one living in it. In front of the house is the highway, and our backyard contains what would also be the back house of a block. It's a big yard, as you can imagine, so the only place for a car to park and rev would be the dealership or where Mum parks. Glancing out the window I noticed a strange car pulled up on the side of our house, almost touching the cactuses and facing our front lawn, as though it were about to go driving on it, if a tree hadn't been in the way. Thinking it was a friend of Mum's boyfriend, I shrugged it off and waited for them to get out of the car and come up to the front door. About 10 to 15 minutes of revving pass and I'm wondering what the hell is going on. I can't see the driver since the tree branches, it was a low-hanging one, were in the way, but I'm not particularly perturbed about it at first. We've had a few people pull up on the nature strip in order to turn around, and initially I thought this might be what was going on after no one got out. I'm starting to get a bit antsy, though, and consider getting the phone and making a call to the cops when a Land Rover pulls up into the dealership, just across the road from the car. It must have spooked them, because whoever was in the car reversed off and left. I shrugged it off, stupid, but it was middle of the day and they hadn't blared horns or interacted in any way weird bar the revving and being on our parking area / nature strip, so I wasn't feeling that worried. I mentioned it when Mum got home. She told me to call her or my aunt if it happened again and it was forgotten for a few days. It was about 10 p.m. and I'd been reading some manga. I'm a nerd, sue me, when I hear a car pull up outside. It didn't really register, just something that my mind was like, oh, car. Mum must be home. And shrugged off. Less than 5 minutes later I hear this pounding on my window and a cracking sound of glass. Of course, this startles the hell out of me. I drop the book and go wide-eyed, looking at the window where the pounding came from, wondering if I'm imagining it. Then a woman starts to scream, calling me a whore and bitch and demanding to see Age and how he's fucked with the wrong woman, how she's going to kill him and me and all kinds of other craziness. I'm like, what the actual fuck? Trying to process what the hell is going on and who this crazy woman is, what I've done to offend her and how she knows Age. I'm a bit shell-shocked and Nat comes bursting into my room looking a bit rattled, while I hear Mum's voice yelling about getting the cops if the woman doesn't clear out. The woman kept screaming and yelling and beating on the house, so the cops were called. She was warned not to come near the property again and we figured it was over. Mum rang Age who told us that she was the ex of his friend. Age had convinced his friend to dump her since she was an abusive woman who'd beat him up on the regular and steal his money, and drugs, of course. So apparently she tracked Age and decided to start a weird campaign of ineffectual terror before things came to a head. Alright, all done. Lady is given the warning to piss off and not bother us again. Age's friend takes her back after another sob story. Age goes to another different town and starts dealing drugs there. Fine. Except no, not fine, because 2 weeks later the crazy woman has been broken up with again. We're outside since it's been a warm day, having a small bonfire around 9 p.m. It's just past dusk, getting darker, and Nat, Mum's boyfriend, Stu, and I are hanging out, just joking around and considering whether we should get some marshmallows or sausages on the bonfire, when we hear a car pull up to the fence, next to the driveway, set a ways back. It's the same car I saw last time, and 3 men climb out and come over to the fence. These are pretty bulky guys, all taller than me. I'm about 160 centimeters. Nat is solidly built but not much taller than me, and Stu was at the time recovering from a motorbike accident that saw him nearly killed. He's also a short assweed, so we're watching these 3 come up with trepidation. Mum, unbeknownst to us at the time, was watching from a window inside the house and had gotten the phone, calling the cops just in case. I had been about to go back inside to get the marshmallows, so I was near the back steps and close to the back door, torn between watching to make sure that Stu and Nat don't get all macho, looking for a weapon of some kind and tearing inside to call the cops. Meanwhile the bitch comes out of the car, happy as a lark, and starts mouthing off about how Age is gonna get his for stealing her man, WTF, and how her friends are gonna beat everyone here up. The men start making threatening noises, demanding Age and the woman's boyfriend to come out or else there'll be some dead bodies laying around. For some reason they thought Age and the guy were here, even though Age was in a whole other part of the country and apparently so was the guy. I was panicking the hell to bits and ducked inside to get the phone, but Mum just judged me, and seeing she had it, kept the back door open to watch. Stu and Nat keep telling them that Age and the guy aren't here, that they're free to check if they want to, if they come back during the day, that kind of thing. At one point Stu grabs a hammer and of course this makes the other guys more aggressive, demanding what he thinks he's going to do with it. One of them tries to open the gate, which is when our dog, Bull Mastiff Cross Pit Bull, starts barking like crazy. He's a good dog, and the guy backs off a bit. Of course, that's about the time the cops showed up. That's when things cool down, but we watched in bewilderment as the guys greet the cops all friendly like and start chatting them up like old buds. They leave, the cops take a few notes and head off, and we hear nothing more about the incident. Thankfully, the woman who incited the whole incident left town not too long after and then ended up in jail after trying to rob a jewelry store with a plastic gun. Age still has questionable tastes in friends, but doesn't bring them around to the house when he visits, thankfully, and the cops, well, some of them are okay, just not the ones that came around that night. Still, be careful of who your friends are involved with because it can cause trouble for you and your family. Some backstory before I begin. These events started when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, 2002/2003-ish, and ended during the fall of 2015. I'm a 21-year-old female living in Canada, RCMP equals Royal Canadian Mounted Police. When I was in elementary school, I was friends with a girl named Jessica. We had a group of 5 or 6 girls that we always played with. Jessica's parents were divorced, and I often went over to her dad's house after school because they had a trampoline and a slide. Her dad was a totally normal dude. His name was Richard and he held a job as a pilot, which is definitely a job that requires mental stability. Jessica came over to my house as well, and her dad would always come pick her up after the play date, so he was familiar with where I lived. In I think 2nd or 3rd grade, Jessica moved away to live with her mom. I didn't fully understand what was going on as a child and I still don't know what happened, but something had gone wrong with her father. We didn't hear much from Jessica, but around her birthday the following year Richard invited our group of girls over for a surprise birthday party. We arrived at the party and were waiting for Jessica so we could surprise her, but Jessica never showed up. We were just hanging out with her dad for a while. As a child, this didn't seem as weird as it does to me now. When our parents picked us up we obviously told them what happened, and we didn't hang out with Jessica or Richard again. After that, some of the girls started receiving presents from Richard at their homes. I never received them, but my mother told me about it years later. The presents usually consisted of cheap jewelry and notes. I have no idea what the notes said, but I'm not sure that I want to. After this, Richard goes away. My mom later told me he was in a mental institution. Years go by. I completely forget about the whole situation. Then, in the winter of 2013, I was out of town for a cheer competition. I was scrolling through Facebook one night when all of a sudden a new group chat popped up with 5 girls from my elementary school. I had not kept in touch with any of them, so this was weird. The chat was about how they had received messages from Richard on Facebook. I checked the other folder of my Facebook messages, and sure enough, I had some too. I had a variety of messages that did not make a lot of sense, including some strange poems. Many of the messages were descriptions of dreams he had about me. Though some of them were nonsense, others were understandable enough to come across as sexually/violently threatening. I don't feel comfortable sharing some of the more explicit messages, but here are a couple of the shorter and less scary messages. Hi little girl from not long ago. Pristine of pristineness, I want you, I want you, I want you. We're gonna have planets to go to someday provided you don't melt them first. I'm so proud of you. Stay happy, and I haven't found a way to keep you all off my mind. I can't see the planets till I make you all mine. You're just so rough. And oh, just so fine. As if I'm there. My love's for you. For you I share. It's so indefinite. For it is all about you. That I only care. Oh my goodness, you're all my whipping cream containers. I clicked on Richard's Facebook profile, and his whole profile was dedicated to us 5 girls. He didn't have any friends added, so clearly nobody had seen it. Unfortunately, we didn't have very good security settings on Facebook. He had saved dozens of photos of us, and then reposted them with nonsensical and inappropriate captions. The captions ranged from essays about his love for us, to a one-sentence caption that simply said, "She is so ugly." Here are some of the shorter photo captions. Emily, hopefully and not too soon I am gonna find out your YXX8511 and I'm gonna show up as a man, then knocks on your front doorstep and bite your bottom lip off before you can say a word. Sierra, because my initial euphoria turns into sunken depression when I realize that there is nothing I can do about anything beside you because you're inside me and I can't get you out of my mind. I love you so much. Melissa, can I paint your picture, and I wanna lift you around to see how heavy you are, and well, go for a drive on Hollywood Drive with the windows rolled down so we can get a crystal clear view. Fucking give it up, like as if I'm gonna pretend I like it. Besides, you're just yanking on my strings, cause time after time it's always the same common denominator, which I noticed. How come you all pluck your eyebrows? But I do pretend I have favorite things, but in reality I don't need them, and I am a good liar because I have a criminal mind like yours. We were all freshly 18 at the time and didn't know what to do. So our moms contacted the RCMP. They told us not to block Richard on Facebook, but not to reply as the messages could be used as evidence. He continued to send us messages every single day, and we shared the screenshots with each other in the group chat and sent them off to the RCMP. He had several different Facebook accounts that were all variations of his name, along with one randomly named Esteban. One of the girls got in touch with Jessica to find out if she still had contact with her father. She only saw him on supervised visits every once in a while. She was very embarrassed, and apologized a lot. She was a super sweet girl, and obviously none of us were upset at her in any way. Eventually, Richard was charged with 5 counts of criminal harassment. He pleaded guilty and went to jail for around 5 months. When he got out, there was still a no-contact order in place, meaning that he could not contact any of us girls or come within a certain radius of our homes. He was not allowed to use the internet either. I'm not sure how all of this works, but this is what the constable handling the case told me. However, not surprisingly, he started contacting us on Facebook again. He went back to jail for breaching his probation. It was the summer of 2015, and he got out again. I started receiving more messages. I immediately wrote on the group chat to see if the other girls had gotten anything. They hadn't. It was just me. I immediately contacted the police. It seems they had forgotten to include my name on the no-contact order. He knew not to contact the other girls, but thought it was still safe for him to contact me. This time things got worse. I had just started working at a new job, and being the idiot that I am, I had my workplace public on my Facebook profile. One day I came into work and there was a package waiting for me. I was obviously confused because I would never order something to be delivered to my work. I opened it up with my managers, and there was weed inside along with a disk with encryption software on it. He had mailed me weed to my work. I knew immediately that this was him, and awkwardly explained the situation to my managers, who thought it was hilarious. The security in my office tower was alerted and given a photo of him. They began walking me to my bus stop after my shifts. It was scary knowing that he knew where I worked. At this point I hadn't seen Richard in years, but it was clear that he was mentally unwell. I had absolutely no idea what he was capable of, or what his motives were. The RCMP did not seem to take this case very seriously, and they moved very slowly, passing the case around to various officers. Meanwhile, I was terrified. I could hardly walk down my street at night without freaking out. Every time somebody knocked on my door while I was home alone, I would drop whatever I was doing and hide under the kitchen counters. I had not moved since I was a child, so it was very possible that he remembered where I lived. The packages kept coming. I received more weed in several different forms, including cookies, what appeared to be cocaine, and a key to his apartment along with some miscellaneous items. I opened all of the packages at the police station. One of the packages included a USB stick with a bunch of audio recordings on them, but I decided it was better for me not listen to them. The return address on the packages was to a random P.O. box in another city that did not belong to Richard, and no fingerprints were found on the packages. During all of this, the Facebook messages remained constant. Luckily, in one of the messages he informed me that he had sent me drugs and the key along with his home address. This confirmed that the packages were from him. He was charged again. I received a subpoena in the mail to appear as a witness in court. However, he once again pleaded guilty and I never got to go to court. I was actually a bit disappointed, as I thought seeing him in person would provide me with some sort of closure. He is still locked up somewhere as I am writing this, but I still get scared walking at night or when somebody knocks on the door. The police provided me zero information on where he was being held or when he would be released. I feel like I am just waiting for the day that he will contact me again. It seems as if every time I think it's over, it isn't. If I do hear from him again, I'll be sure to post an update. This situation could have been a lot worse. As far as I know, he did not physically follow me around or anything. I strongly encourage you all to make sure your Facebook privacy settings are as private as possible.